It turns out, of all the things you can do to protect yourself from viruses, one of them is have smaller puddings. This is a small disaster, as I do love a pudding, as you'll hear on this podcast. But Dr. Matt Cook goes over some of the research on today's Zestology about blood sugar levels and immunity, and that could mean smaller puddings for you and me in future. Welcome to Zestology, the podcast all about energy, vitality and motivation. I'm Tony Wrighton, strolling around the streets near my home. I've done a lot of strolling around these streets over the last couple of months. In fact, I think I've walked on every road about 15 times. I'm desperate for some new scenery. We have got in the car a couple of times and been slightly further afield. We're allowed to do that now. We went to Windsor for the day. We got there about 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday and it was lovely. We didn't see anyone. And we went round Frensham Little Ponds as well, which if you don't live anywhere near Frensham Little Ponds, you'll have never heard of it, but that is a lovely place as well. But mainly it's these streets, and it's a good excuse to come out on these streets and record this podcast intro. And today's podcast is with Dr. Matt Cook, who is a specialist in immunity. And I had him on Zestology a couple of months ago. He has been studying the latest science around coronavirus and COVID-19 for the last couple of months and looking at the very latest techniques, supplements, lifestyle practices for boosting our immunity as much as possible. And when I had him on a couple of months ago, I said, look, can we arrange another podcast kind of for June at some point where you could just update your research because it's all kind of changing so quickly, and he has. So also on this podcast, as well as puddings and desserts, and I'm not happy about the whole pudding situation, we'll also talk antibody testing, sorting out the gut, and whether a miracle supplement that is supposed to tighten the junctions in your stomach. We'll explain more about that as it goes along, whether this miracle supplement is actually worth it or not. Before we get to Matt, a disclaimer: please don't start any new regime without consulting your medical practitioner, and if you think you're suffering from any illness or disease, especially coronavirus, you obviously must get the appropriate medical advice, as Dr. Cook will advocate on this podcast and on the other podcasts as well. You know, you must get the advice and consult with your practitioner. That's the disclaimer out of the way. Dr. Matt Cook runs a functional medicine clinic called BioReset Medical. He's one of the world's top experts in the area of natural health and immunity, and here he is on Zestology. What have you learnt about coronavirus and COVID-19 and the way that we can look after ourselves, which you didn't know when we last chatted a couple of months ago?
I think the frustrating thing is we haven't made a whole lot of progress. What we thought then and what we know more now is that the more we continue to socially distance, probably the better. And yet the more we do that, the worse the economy. So we're in a catch-22 on that. All of the drugs, when we spoke, there was some optimism that some of the malaria type of drugs might be quite beneficial. And there was one where there's a combination of that with a drug called azithromycin. That's a common drug people take for upper respiratory infections. That has not turned out to be that exciting. There's still a bunch of trials going on, but the results are not great. And there's some other drugs that may have some benefit, but not enormously beneficial. So, and yet everything, we're getting interesting case reports of people who are from all over the world calling in of things that they're doing to improve their immunity and get healthier, and it's been helping them. And so we can start to take some control over this by getting as healthy as we possibly can. But there's going to be no easy cure that I know of from the Western medicine side.
Yeah. And in terms of this, obviously that's science you were referring to in terms of the potential treatment options. And that is quite a shame, isn't it? Because I know you were quite optimistic about the potential for some of these anti-malaria drugs, for example, working.
Yeah. I was watching the same news cycle that you were, and so the early evidence that came out of France seemed great. But people are having a hard time reproducing that now. There's a lot of interest in vaccines, but vaccines are not a slam dunk either. Sometimes it'll take 5 or 10 or 15 years to develop a good vaccine. We've been working, for example, on HIV vaccines for more than 20 years, and we still don't have one. So it's a journey. It's a journey. But then I think that the journey is actually going to bring us to functional medicine, and I think that is going to be one of the best places for people to end up going to when this is all over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, absolutely. Ultimately, it is about getting healthier, isn't it? To be able to fight it off. And we can get into some of the things that might help with boosting immunity before, potentially during contracting the virus as well. But I just wonder, are there any studies going on based around natural immunity boosters, not cures for COVID-19, but something like vitamin D, for example?
So there's thousands of trials going on right now. So I'm sure there's some people who are looking at vitamin D. There's lots of evidence that vitamin D, if it's low, places people at higher risk of viral infections. I've submitted several applications to study ozone therapy, to study exosomes, to study quercetin and an extract of olive. So we're looking at this, and I hope to begin enrolling patients in our trials within the next month or so. And I think that though that ozone therapy is I think will end up being the most effective therapy. If we sit down and talk in 2 years and we look back at coronavirus and we look at the data, I think we'll find that ozone therapy is going to be the most effective thing. I think the regenerative therapies are going to end up being quite helpful in terms of taking care of some of the post-COVID complications that some people get, the pulmonary scarring. And so I think we'll find some very interesting evidence around that. The challenge is these just are not widely accepted by traditional medicine, and so we need to get some data out there and prove it to them.
So, okay, well, let's start with ozone therapy because that's great, and I don't actually know very much about that. Are you suggesting that you will treat patients who you don't know whether they have coronavirus or not?
No, so the trial that we're going to try to do is we're going to try to do two things. A, find people who have acute cases of COVID-19, and so these are people who are going to be diagnosed based upon symptoms and also based upon testing. And so then that would be an acute case, and then we'd like to treat number one. And then number two, and there's challenges and problems with testing. Okay. So that's a whole issue in and of itself. And then two, people who were positive and continue to have post-COVID symptoms. And so then the question is going to be, can we treat them? And then will these treatments help some of the post-COVID symptoms? Because we're going to, there are some people who've had it and then get it again. And then they were discharged from the hospital and ended up bouncing back into the hospital. And so it's we're learning this virus and we're learning the natural history of how it works. And so, but it's going to last longer than people think. And I think that some people may have problems for months, and then some of the complications can affect people for the rest of their lives. For example, some people get kidney failure from it. Some people can have heart problems, heart attacks from it. People have had strokes from it. So it's going to be, there's going to be an entire field of medicine that is going to be treating the complications of this in the years to come.
Right, yeah, I know I told you last time that we are pretty sure that we have had it, although we're not certain because there's very little testing going on here still. And certainly the aftermath of it for me, and I'm very grateful to have had it very mildly compared to so many people, went on a considerable time. In 5 or 6 weeks, I would have thought. And so that doesn't really come as any surprise. What's ozone therapy then, and how can that help? And is it something that we can do preventatively as well?
So I want to be very careful with my words. What we should do is see if we treated someone preventatively, if that would prevent it. And so I would say hypothetically, my guess is that it would prevent it, but we don't know that, and so we need to figure out a way to prove that. But ozone is an oxidative therapy, and so within the human body, there are lots of oxidation reduction reactions that are constantly going on. And so when ozone therapy, what happens, the blood form of ozone therapy is that ozone and an ozone oxygen mixture is mixed with blood. And then that blood is then put back into the body. So some blood is taken out of the body. That blood is mixed with a mixture of oxygen and ozone. And then the blood goes back in. So there's no gas that goes into the body, but the ozone dissolves in the blood. And then when it does, it forms lipid peroxides with some of the cholesterol that's in your blood. And then it can facilitate an oxidation reduction reaction within your body. And one of the things it can do is it can oxidize viruses. It can also oxidize bacteria, because bacteria and viruses do not have much of a buffering capacity to deal with that oxidative stress, and so it kills them. And so I have a long history of using different ozone modalities to take care of other patients with chronic infections, including other viral problems, including things like Lyme disease. And so then what happens is we can take some blood out, mix it, and then put it back in. And then not only does that have that effect, but it also causes the body to have an antioxidant response. And so the body makes a whole bunch of antioxidants in response to it. And that seems to stimulate the immune system. And so naturopathic doctors and doctors that use ozone have been using ozone for decades as a modality to help fight chronic infections.
Okay. So that's something that you're kind of perhaps most optimistic about. I'm sure a lot of people will be listening to this and thinking, what have you learned over the last 6 weeks in terms of preventative ways and kind of immune system boosting methods for making sure we're as healthy as possible? You mentioned functional medicine. Well, that's really what it's all about, isn't it? To try and get yourself into a position where you're healthy, and so that viruses don't affect you quite as badly.
Right. And so from functional medicine perspective, there's a couple things. So one is to step back and take a look at your health and take a systems approach to looking at everything and seeing if anything's going on. And so by systems, we think the neurological system, cardiovascular system, pulmonary system. Most important right there is going to be the gastrointestinal system, because a lot of people can have inflammation in the intestines. And then once they get inflammation there, it can start to spill over and leak into the cardiovascular system. So, and you probably heard the term leaky gut.
Yeah.
A lot of times people will have food allergies. A lot of times people can have sensitivity to alcohol. So there's a whole host of issues that people can have with any system. And so as a functional medicine doctor, what I'll do is I'll talk to people and find out their system, what systems they're having problems with. And often I'll find one thing that happened 10 years ago, and it just kept going. And then that led to another problem and another problem and another problem. And so then we just start to do lifestyle modification, try to eliminate toxins, develop detox strategies. We'll do blood testing and do things like look at the vitamin D, and I'll see where it is. And it's very commonly low. And so then we'll use things like supplements to start to bring those back up. Strategies of great food, and potentially eliminating certain things if they're causing problems. and then trying to get all of the systems working better together. And that tends to have a side effect of improving your immunity.
Yeah. The gut it's quite a tough one to unravel on your own, or even with help, isn't it? It's just so complicated.
It's so complicated, and then there's the overlay of the fact that we're always putting things into our gut that might not be the best thing for us.
Yeah.
So part of my whole thing is to try to find a way to get in and create good changes. And so part of that is, how do I motivate myself and how do I motivate other people to start to make great decisions in terms of what we eat, what we drink, and then also we do a lot of stool testing. So I'll do stool testing and I'll look to see if people have parasites. A lot of times I'll pick up people can have bacteria living in their small intestine. We call that SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And a lot of times we'll find a lot of people are quite sensitive to gluten and dairy. And so then often we'll eliminate that. And you would be amazed at how much improvement people can get from minimizing alcohol, eliminating gluten and dairy, and then just making some good decisions, and then starting to pay attention to how you feel. And because often what will happen is I'll talk to people and then we'll figure out like they're really sensitive to something, and then we'll eliminate it. And the next thing you know, they feel way better.
Yeah.
So it's functional medicine is 100% common sense.
Yeah. I mean, with the gut, it's very interesting. I can't remember if I told you last time, but I kind of figured out about a year ago that I've always had a bit of a kind of dodgy gut, as I would put it. It's very inconsistent, and sometimes it would be fine, and then for no reason I'd think I was eating healthily and it wouldn't be fine. And I worked out that for me there was some kind of histamine intolerance going on. It was an absolute revelation working this out, and it's made a huge difference to my life, actually. In terms of just eating a low histamine diet and feeling a lot better. But I still have this feeling that underneath it all, there's a reason for that histamine intolerance. And that's the bit that's quite hard to figure out, because long term it's still there.
Did you have the histamine intolerance when you were younger?
I think from the age of 17 or 18, yeah.
Have you ever taken, there's some supplements that can, like Histade, have you ever tried any of those supplements? There's some supplements that can help with that sensitivity.
Yeah, and it massively does.
Okay.
I've taken not Histade, but I've taken Histamine X, some of these Seeking Health ones, and I've tried everything. Honestly, I love it because I've really kind of geeked out on it. What I find interesting is the fact that, I mean, I feel great now. But if I eat loads of high histamine food, or if I drink wine, that's the absolute worst. Unfortunately, because I like wine, but I don't really drink it anymore. But there's still that imbalance there in the gut that's causing the histamines, unless it's genetic, which it doesn't seem to be.
So I generally feel that if something happened and you're sensitive to something you weren't sensitive before, often we find a low-level stealth infection that's underneath that. And so you may have had a long-term parasite infection or dysbiosis, an imbalance of the good and bad bacteria. And over time, one of the things that will happen is people will start to be sensitive to histamines, and sometimes people can get an overactivity of an aspect of the immune system that's kind of related to that, called mast cell activation.
Yeah.
And I generally find that there's an association with infections. And so then we start to do the stool testing, and then we start to rebuild, and it's like a remodeling project, rebuilding the gut. And I think it's the most important thing. Like, I'm not sure if I told you, I said if I could do one thing, I would just I'd fix everybody's gut.
Yeah. It's amazing how many people suffer from gut problems, which is why I bring it up. And I know, like, I mean, you saying this in terms of immunity, if you can sort that out, Everything. I mean, the connection between the gut and the brain is extraordinary for me. I mean, when my gut's not good, my brain just does not work well.
Right. And so then part of that is because we've got these super tight junctions in our gut. And so everything that we eat stays in there. And all the bacteria and everything are in there. And now the immune system is right next to those tight junctions, and it's going to protect us from anything that gets in. But then once we start to get inflammation, and whether that be in the small intestine or large intestine, and they're a little bit different, or once we start to have problems, those tight junctions start to loosen up. And when they loosen up, little bits of undigested food or little bits of toxins start to leak in there. And now they're floating around in your bloodstream. And then once that happens, then people can start to have cognitive symptoms from that. So this is quote unquote brain fog, but it's coming from the gut.
Yeah.
And then often what happens is people can develop a little bit of autoimmunity towards the brain. So they can actually start to make antibodies. Like, for example, if you got coronavirus, your body would make antibodies to the coronavirus. But sometimes your body can start to accidentally make antibodies to yourself, and it can do it in the gut pretty commonly, and especially in people with food allergies. And it can also do it to the brain. And so now there's an immune action process where your immune system is attacking your brain, and your immune system is attacking your gut. And the food that you're putting in starts to drive that. And then as that happens, that makes the leaky gut worse. And then that starts to compound the brain fog. And then sometimes there's infections that are overlaid on top of that.
Yeah.
And then these are the people who are most sensitive, I think, and more susceptible to things like viral infections, because their immune system's a little bit on the ropes. And instead of making antibodies against viruses and bacteria, they're making antibodies against themselves.
Yeah.
And so then the name of the game here is then to figure out what you're sensitive to, and then start to change and mix up the diet. So, it's interesting. I'm sitting here. I've got some bone broth, cold bone broth, but it's like the breakfast of champions because there's a bunch of collagen in there. And so I'm healing my gut that way. And my whole day is designed around healing my gut and keeping it super dialed in. And my gut's better than it's ever been in my whole life. And it is a practice that I spend my whole day organized around being super dialed in. And so, and I think now is an amazing time to do it. So like we're all stuck at home. And so I have a joke with my friend that my goal is to cook the best dinner in the Bay Area every single day. And so I'm just cooking amazing food every day and getting super dialed in. Doing intermittent fasting can be super helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But then it's a experience of trying things and trying different things. And as soon as you start to find a few things that work, and then you start to feel better, and then neurologically that has kind of a side effect of feeling better, then people just start to get more and more dialed in.
Yeah. Certainly I am cooking more than ever myself, and my diet is probably cleaner, although I am eating a lot within that intermittent fasting window. Just interrupting this podcast for one moment to tell you about a new magnesium product. If there's one mineral you should be worried about not getting enough of, it is magnesium. It's a subject that's come up so many times on this podcast. Magnesium is the body's master mineral, powerful for over 300 critical reactions, including detox, fat metabolism, energy, this podcast about energy, and even digestion. But there's a couple of problems, and that is that magnesium has largely been missing from the soil since the 1950s, and that explains why up to 80% of us might be deficient. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? But apparently the soil has just been ploughed so much that all the magnesium has gone out of it. So it might be a good idea to supplement. Most supplements only have one or two forms of magnesium. even when in reality there's about 7 different types of magnesium that you could be taking. But I'm excited to tell you about my podcast partners for June, and that is Magnesium Breakthrough, the ultimate magnesium supplement, easily the best that I've ever taken. Although I've only just started this magnesium challenge for June, I'm already enjoying it, and I can tell it's good. I'm taking Mag Breakthrough for June, and I'm excited because it's in stock, and as a Zestology listener you can get it now. If you head to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology, you'll get a custom 10% coupon, a Zestology 10, which will be applied when you head there. And actually some of the packages they've got, you'll get 40% off as well. So if you do take magnesium, you might want to try a magnesium product which has got 7 different types of it. If you don't, I'm surprised, because I've talked about it on Zestology quite a bit, and it might be the time to get involved with Magnesium June. It's a working title, but we're going to take magnesium for June and see how we feel, and I'm doing it as well. I'm feeling good on the first few days, and I'll report back later in the month. But I'm enjoying the Magnesium Breakthrough. If you head to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology, you'll get 10% off. You'll get all the details. You will not get that deal on Amazon or the company's website or anywhere else. And get that full spectrum and effective magnesium, and make sure you get 7 different types of it. That's it, back to the show. Looking at immunity and originally talking about coronavirus and the gut, I wanted to ask you about a particular supplement, because you were talking about those junctions in the gut that can get a little bit loose and cause leaky gut. You might know what I'm going to say, but there's a product called Restore Gut, which is a liquid that was developed by Zach Bush, I think. And the whole idea is that it tightens up the junctions in the gut. I wonder if you tried that and whether you thought it was any good.
So I think he is really good. What's in that?
It is some kind of mineral formation, I think. It's all slightly mysterious. I have tried it in the past, and I think I kind of thought it was quite good, although I don't take it at the moment, which probably shows that it wasn't one of my absolute go-tos. But I know that something like that would be very appealing to people who are looking to, tighten up those gut junctions.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of different strategies. It's funny because I don't know him, but I'd like to talk to him, because 2 patients actually found him on a podcast and sent it to me. So it was entertaining. And I was just going to try to look and see if I could pull it up.
Yeah, no problem. You have a look and see. I mean, I think it's called Restore for Life with a number 4. I think that might be what they're under on Amazon, or Restore Gut.
Okay. Yeah. So he's got some soil-based probiotics.
Yes.
And so I've generally been quite positive on soil-based probiotics.
Is it actually probiotic, or is it just a soil-based liquid?
I'm not going to do it justice to look it up right now.
Yeah.
But there are, of the 50 strategies that are out there to fix the gut, one of those strategies is incorporating either soil-based, some soil-based, some clays. Sometimes people can use bentonite, which can bind onto toxins.
Yeah. Is that like zeolite? Zeolite.
Yes. Yeah. Bentonite and zeolite, and sometimes people will use soil-based microbes, and I think that. But I'm not super knowledgeable about that product.
Fair enough. Yeah. So obviously charcoal is another binder that people use sometimes. Is that? I mean, I wouldn't have thought people would want to use that unless they need it, would they?
So charcoal is a great binder and sometimes using a binder can be very helpful for people. And then also sometimes what can happen is if you have an infection in your gut and there's a biofilm there, sometimes people can get mold that lives in the biofilm, and the mold secretes mycotoxins. So one strategy that we'll use is we will use binders to bind onto those mycotoxins to keep them out and to bind onto other toxins. And so when you do that, that can affect your ability to absorb nutrients. And so typically what we will do is have someone either take some charcoal pills, or you can take a small amount of charcoal and put it in water and then drink it. And then usually we'll wait about an hour before people take other supplements so that the charcoal doesn't bind onto their other supplements. Charcoal can sometimes be a little bit constipating, but usually it's not. And sometimes people who have a lot of brain fog, if they start to add that in, it will really help them, like significantly.
Yeah.
And so I do like charcoal, and I do like binders, and particularly for people who have mold. It has the potential to be a home run. And so it's something that's worth trying. Sometimes people will do better with it in the morning, and sometimes people will do better with it in the evening. And so then if I think that there's mold, I like to do a urine test, and I also do an antibody test to see if they have antibodies to mold and if they have high levels of mold in the urine. And then if I find that, then I try to get them to look and make sure they don't have any water damage in their house or at their job.
Yeah. So, I mean, the testing is really interesting, isn't it? The coronavirus testing, as far as the antibody testing is concerned, a lot of us might be worrying, but we might have already had it, which would be quite a game changer if we knew. What do you think of these antibody tests that are out there? Are they reliable?
So there's a whole bunch of antibody testing, and the problem is that there's going to be some cross reactivity to other coronaviruses. And so then you would hate to have feel like the sense of security that, oh, I got it and I'm fine. And then find out that, oh, that was a cross reaction to another flu that I got back in November.
Oh dear. So you might test for COVID-19, but it wasn't COVID-19, it was COVID-42.
Exactly. And so then there's different validations in terms of sensitivity. And so this is something people are going to have to go over with their doctor for each test, because each one is different. And so there are antibodies for you can see if you have antibodies for the spike. There's different antibodies depending on what the antibody is designed to attack. We are evolving into our understanding of this, and I hope that I'm hearing that we're gonna have some very good antibody testing. This could be like 99% specific, but then the sensitivity and specificity for these antibody testing also is affected by how many people you're testing and how many people in the population have it. And so it's not a total home run. And then also, we don't know if you got it, if that means you're immune. And we're not going to know that for some time, because some people seem to have it. It can come back, and it may be because it never left their body, but it may be that they got re-exposed. Yeah. And so we don't know this, and it's a evolving and nuanced problem.
So we go back to boosting the immune system.
So I know that's the insane thing. So we go back to that. Now the issue is, and there's a great graph that a friend of mine showed me. On day 0, if you get symptoms, you could very easily have a fever on day 0 and still test negative. So for the first 2 or 3 days, if you have symptoms and you had a loss of smell and a fever, a high fever and shortness of breath, we would clinically say that almost for sure you have COVID, particularly if there was exposure. But then we'll test for the RNA with a nasal swab. And then if that's negative, we'll probably wait a couple of days and retest for that. Now, if we did an antibody test on those days, the antibody test is probably going to be negative, because the virus is making RNA, but you haven't made enough antibodies yet. Yeah. And so we're waiting for a few days, maybe a week, before those antibody levels come up. And then the different antibodies are going to come up sequentially. And so it's not 100% ready for prime time, and yet we've got to do a better job of getting everybody in the world tested. And then, and then, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with vaccines, because all of the big pharma companies are all working on vaccines, and so J&J and all of these huge multinational companies are going to be coming out with vaccines over the next year, and so then that's going to play big into how society reopens in terms of how effective those are, and then and then we've got our drugs and we've got our building our immune system and staying healthy. But the best thing you can do is build your immune system, stay healthy, avoid all the bad things, and then give yourself the best shot to be in a super healthy state.
Yeah.
There was an interesting article that came out and this is something for people to think about who have diabetes. People who have higher blood sugar definitely have a higher risk of having problems with COVID. It turns out if you have poor blood sugar control, you're going to do worse with COVID. And so in addition to fixing the gut, that's probably the number one thing that I could say that for all of the whole world would help lower risk of problems. And it's a great health strategy as well.
So reducing blood sugar, and presumably that means eating less sweet food and limiting carbs as well. I mean, is that, we're looking at prevention now, and there are people who are, things are starting to reopen, aren't they? People going back to work. And I mean, I've been going in all the time to Sky, and it is completely impossible to properly social distance and not come into contact with anything, because apart from anything else, you have to open doors and sit on toilets and all the rest of it. So, I mean, is that something that you would recommend then?
Well, so it's interesting to think about this going back to work thing. I think the main thing, I think that there's a way to go back to work and go back to doing things and re-engage and get our society back going and still keep the risk low. And I think the best thing that we can do is wear masks. Because what happens is when we're speaking right next to each other, little droplets can come from our airway, and that's how people are getting infected for the most part. Now, if we wear masks and we eliminate that and we don't shake hands and we go in, if we're wearing masks, there's going to be much less virus on the countertops because we're all covered. And so my practice, I reopened my practice because we've got sick patients with millions of problems, and they've all been at home with no one to help them. And so I felt like I had to get back to taking care of people. And I'm really happy we did that. I think that we're going to be in some form of social distancing for the next 6 or 8 or 9 months or a year, maybe. We're going to be wearing masks. But I think we also can get back out there and start going to work, and people can go into a coffee shop, and people should be able to go into a nail salon and
I need a haircut so bad.
I need a hair. I've given myself 3 quarantine haircuts.
Have you? That's bold.
Yeah, I have the clippers.
Yeah,
and the first one was the total catastrophe, but ever since then I'm doing better.
Yeah, my partner is desperate to give me a haircut, and I told her that it's just not happening. I don't trust her.
That's funny. I've offered to give everyone in my office haircuts, so nobody's taken me up on it yet. But yeah, so I think we got to get back out there, and I think if we take some minimal measures, I think we're going to take most of the social risk away. And people, and the other thing we've been doing a lot of is helping people with PTSD in and around this, because there's so much fear. And so one of the things I do is I just kind of talk to people and cheer them up. But the other thing that we do is ketamine therapy, which is I'm not sure how available that is, but it's super helpful for people with kind of going through trauma and PTSD, because it makes you feel super safe and connected.
Yeah.
it's like a mild psychedelic, but it makes people feel wonderful. And we use that as an experience to kind of reset the fight or flight nervous system. And it's been quite impactful for a lot of people that we work with. And we're doing it over telemedicine, just like this.
Are you really? Wow. Yeah, I've got a friend who he's had some issues with his health over the last few years, and he's kind of got very into mushrooms, which is, it's certainly not legal in this country, but I think he went to a retreat in Jamaica and did kind of organized, guided mushroom ceremonies over the course of a week. And he absolutely swears by the fact that he feels so differently about his illness and about his body and his health now. So I can imagine that ketamine might work as well. It's a far cry from being 17 years old and seeing people taking ketamine in the corner of a nightclub and thinking, I'm glad that's not me.
It's so interesting. And it works way better when it's part of a therapeutic thing compared to doing it in a nightclub.
Yes, obviously. Yeah.
But all of the psychedelic medicines do something to kind of reset the central nervous system. And so then I generally am a fan of things that have a input that reset, and that's why I call my company BioReset. And I think that within 5 or 6 years, psilocybin is going to be legal in the United States, probably for specific things like PTSD, and it seems to affect a network that's related to our ego and our sense of identity called the default mode network. And what it seems to do is it seems to help in our ability to reprogram that. And so then all of a sudden, people start to have a softer sense of their own identity, and then they start to be way more interested in having connection with other people. And I'm super interested in trauma and PTSD, so we do injections like the stellate ganglion block. We do ketamine. I have a lot of patients who have used psychedelics and psilocybin and things like that, and so I'm learning from them as they're telling me their stories. And I'm not using any of those now because they're not legal, but I think that direction is going to be a profound and important direction for medicine to move in the years to come.
Right. Now, I think I asked you this before, but I'm going to ask you again. What is one book that you would recommend and one tip for living with more energy and vitality? One book, can be anything, can be a bit of fiction or non-fiction, and one tip.
Okay. I forgot that you were going to ask me this. I read this book, and it's called The Brothers K. And I think the author's name is David James Duncan. I loved this book. And it's not the Brothers Karamazov, but it's just called The Brothers K.
Okay.
And then my tip is going to be, as you re-engage, go check your vitamin D and find out what it is. And if it's low, improve it.
Is there something with vitamin D levels? I don't think I've ever had my vitamin D levels checked, or maybe I have as part of a bigger panel. But is there something based around fluctuations at a certain point of the day? I mean, if you tested in the morning, would it be higher than the evening? Is it reliable getting your vitamin D tested?
That's going to be a reliable number. And so if it's 20, in the morning, it's going to be 20 in the evening. And so there's not going to be a huge shift. I don't think. Right. I've never heard that. The vast majority of people that I test are low, and some people are very low. You'd like it to be based on I'm not sure what the UK numbers are. If on our scale, you'd like it to be 60 to 80, and we see people all the time that are 5 or 10, 15,
wow.
20. Yeah, and so then, as you begin to imagine, if you were biohacking, imagine that you could have a panel of all of your labs and all of your numbers on a spreadsheet, almost like you were doing the financials for your business. And so what you'd really like to do is take a look have a dashboard and have all of those optimized. And so that's what we do. And so then next thing you know, I'm looking at markers of inflammation. I'm looking at vitamins. I'm looking at minerals. And then we're just getting all of that dialed in, making great choices, and then living an amazing life. And then if you've got trauma, let it go. And it's it's amazing what a boost in immunity I find when people start to go back and let go of traumas and things that have been holding them down. It's probably the most profound thing that I've seen in medicine.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? And that's not it. And that's not a supplement or anything, or diet or anything else. It's something.
I know
emotional.
that's a great.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. There's more nerve endings in our gut than is in our brain.
Yeah.
And so that's why people with GI problems have this intimate neurological thing. And I'm fundamentally kind of a nerve person. And I just evolved into doing a lot of GI stuff just because almost anybody that has nerve problems has gut problems.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, Matt, look, it's great to talk to you again. Thanks so much. Got plenty of actionable steps. And I know you've got your podcast now. Where can people listen to that and find out more about what you do?
Oh, BioResetPodcast.com. And you can just find me at BioReset, BioReset.com.
Good. And what's on the menu tonight for the best food in the Bay Area?
The best food in the Bay Area. Okay, here's what's going to happen. An arugula salad. I'm going to drizzle a little bit of balsamic vinegar, not much, but I've got some amazing balsamic vinegar, and then I've got some incredible organic olive oil, and just a little bit of salt, and I'll probably shave some radishes on there, and then I'll put and then that's going to be the salad.
That sounds sensational.
I often will put just a small amount of sauerkraut on top or on the side. And then I'll often drink just a tiny bit of the sauerkraut juice as like an aperitif before the dinner. Then what I'll do is I'll have I'm going to bake broccoli rabe. And I have some and what I'll do with the broccoli rabe is I'll chop that up, and I'll put shiitake mushrooms on top of it, and then I'll drizzle olive oil and salt and pepper on that, and then I'm going to bake that in the oven for about 45 minutes.
Beautiful.
Then I'm going to have some kale. And I'll chop that kale up and I'll saute that in olive oil. And so then I'll have basically two greens, and I'll rotate through different types of kale. So I'll have that. And then I'm going to put a little bit of pine nuts in there and a little bit of salt and pepper. And that's going to be totally delicious. And then I'm going to, I have a Traeger grill, and this is like the greatest barbecue grill that there is because you get these little wood pellets, and then you get it hot, and there's almost no smoke, but it has an incredible flavor. And then I'm going to barbecue a buffalo ribeye. And I'm going to barbecue it to perfection, where I'm going to cook it. It's going to be pink all the way through. And I've totally mastered how to do that.
I mean, my mouth is watering. This sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And then I do something like that good every single day. And, it was interesting because I used to go out to business dinners all the time. And then ever since COVID, now I've been cooking like this every day. And I don't ever want to go out to dinner anymore because I eat like this. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But then most important, no dessert. No dessert because this is a really helpful. And then the other thing that I'll do is I'll bake a sweet potato.
Okay.
But
back to no dessert, I just need to talk to you about this because I do like it. Just a little pudding, as we call it here, to round things off.
Okay, so I've been thinking about this. There is a moderate amount of evidence that and I guess maybe this is just more anecdotal of how I feel and talking to patients. When you put sweet on top of protein, I think that messes up your digestive situation. And so even though there's nobody that loves dessert more than me, and I love the idea of it, that's the one thing that will throw me off. It was interesting. I have to admit that I have ice cream probably 3 times a year, and a friend of mine came over here and brought ice cream, and then I said, you know what? Let's just have a great time, and let's have a wonderful dinner and have a fantastic. Okay, fine, I'm gonna have ice cream, and then the next day I did not feel good, and so then that was like a data point for me, and I was like, okay, I can't eat ice cream. I do the same thing about once a year, where I always say, if you took me to like the south of France and took me to Bono's house, I would totally eat croissants with him. but in general, I'm gluten free. But then I'll have some situation once a year where I'll do it, and then I'll pay the price the next day. Yeah. And so then that just gets you to making better decisions. So I don't really mind that it happens. But the immune response lasts for about 6 or 8 weeks. And so making great decisions and sticking with those is going to do more to change your life than anything else.
Right.
Because it takes that consistency of long periods of time. So my coronavirus challenge to you is to avoid the pudding for a month and then tell me how you feel. And I bet you might feel better, and it might make your histamine thing better.
Yeah. I mean, we're even talking like blueberries and a bit of coconut. I mean, is that it? Like, surely that's not too bad.
Okay, so blueberries and coconut. So this is sugar on top of protein.
Yeah.
And so I have just found that when people stop eating sugar after food, they do better.
Right.
And yet it's hard, because who doesn't love, like, the concept of coconut and blueberries after dinner sounds so amazing.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
It's a great concept, but if you can, what I encourage people to do is try avoiding it for a month, and then do a little journal, and then start to see how your gut feels in the morning, and then you may feel a lot better. Yeah. If you don't feel better, then maybe you keep doing it.
Yeah. Okay. Look, that's a disappointing note to end on. No, I'm just kidding. It's a great note to end it on. Matt, thanks so much, and we'll hopefully speak to you again soon.
Okay. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
That's it for Zestology. Thank you to Matt Cook. Thank you for listening. Quick reminder to head to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology. Most supplements contain only 1 or 2 forms of magnesium, but Magnesium Breakthrough contains 7. So it might be time for you to get involved in Magnesium June, working title, and see if it makes a difference. You might find it especially helps with sleep and easing those aching muscles. If you head to magbreakthrough.com/Zestology, you'll get 10% off. You get 40% on a kind of selected deal or 2. They are my partners for June. And the deal that you'll find on that site, you will not find on Amazon or anywhere else. So it's definitely worth checking out. magbreakthrough.com/Zestology, and let me know how you get on with the magnesium as well. I've always found it quite hard to know exactly which magnesium to get involved with, and I'm hoping that Magnesium Breakthrough is going to be the one that I stick with forever. Oh, thanks for listening to Zestology. I'm walking around the streets around my home at the moment. It's increasingly hard to socially distance. There's so many people. I just had to turn back on myself while I was recording this podcast, talking about magbreakthrough.com/Zestology, as about 3 different people walked past me from different directions and giving me very strange looks. It's probably partly because I've got recording equipment in one hand, my iPhone in the other hand, and on the recording equipment, because it's a very hot day here, but it's quite a windy day, I've got my fluffy microphone cover, so it looks a bit silly. But look, thanks for listening to Zestology. I hope you're staying safe and healthy wherever you are. I suppose that's the ultimate goal of this podcast. energy, vitality, motivation, and definitely staying safe and healthy. So yeah, have a good one. Head to TonyWrighton.com for a little bit more on today's podcast, a picture of us talking, and loads more. And I'll speak to you next week.